I kid you not, there was someone urinating on the front steps as we were meeting with the venue manager. And I just about died. I thought, how could I have ever brought this big financial firm meeting planner into this venue? And I thought this was like my top choice going into the week. And I think those are some of the moments where our clients are super appreciative that we do the work in advance, but also in the destinations where we have all these huge offices, we know inside and out what's going to work. We can save so many of the times of going up to a venue and having a true embarrassing moment, which is what that could have and basically was for me in the pre-planning day. All right, here we are, excited to talk about today's topic, which is how to plan a corporate event without local knowledge. You can't. The reality is the reason that we exist is because we are destination experts, and you need to be destination experts to really create a local experience for a corporate event. So I'm really excited to talk about this today and to dive into some stories that have really proven this point through and through.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you nailed it on the head. I mean, there's nothing more daunting than having to plan a major event in a place you've never been. So that's why DMCs are so important. So I kind of want to kick it off with a question, because I know that you guys are destination experts in Boston. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, maybe a client that came to you and you kind of ran with your local knowledge and how that impacted a program.
Yeah, I think it impacts our programs almost every time. There's moments where we talk to a customer and they think that they have a vision. They've always done it this way. We always do golf tournaments during our programs, and not for nothing, but you don't come to Boston to go golfing. So we always have to tell people Boston's not the golf destination. And if you really want to make the most out of your time in Boston, maybe golf isn't what you want to spend, 8 hours of your 2-day trip doing. So there's so many times when we have to have those conversations. But that's when it's really fun, because we get to say, hey, but have you ever thought about this? So for example, I was talking to a client just the other day, and they always have done fairly traditional large events for about 1,300 people with a seated dinner and a just a really nice meal, get dressed up and celebrate, being invited to this meeting and whatever destination they're in. So last time I think it was Arizona, and upcoming they're coming to Boston. And 1,300 people in Boston is a big number for some of our venues that really just can't accommodate that size. And so we have to have a conversation with them to say, we can do that. Here's a couple of places that could work, but they're not going to give you that Boston moment that you're looking for. How would you feel about instead taking the whole group to an island on the Boston Harbor and giving them an authentic New England clambake where they can watch the sunset over the harbor? They can all have a place to sit down and eat a lobster, but it's not a fancy fine dining 5-star, 5-course meal. There's running water and there's real bathrooms and all of those amenities they're looking for. There's bars on the bus, on the boat rides over, but what about doing it that way and really giving them an authentic local experience? And the client said, I never would have thought of that. That is totally exciting. It sounds so much more fun than sitting at a stuffy meal in a museum, and let's explore it. And even though their site visit is in the winter months, they're like, let's get on that boat, let's go out to that island and see what it's all about. And it's exciting to have those conversations be well received, to say, okay, you are the local experts. Give me those ideas where we want to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's like fully grasping the destination's potential is the key, and coming in with preconceived ideas and then hearing from your DMC, hey, this is the direction we think you should go. Sometimes those are hard conversations to have with clients because they come in with expectations. But I think, we use the opportunity like on those site visits or on those pre-planning calls to really set up and showcase the experience and what it's going to be about, and really sell that opportunity. And I think that's when the magic happens, right? Is when they kind of put their expectations to the side and trust us that we know what we're talking about, and showcasing that authentic local experience. They walk away going, I should have thought about this from the beginning.
Totally. And I think I've been in a situation a few times where I went to a destination. And I wasn't the local expert. And I thought I had the idea that was perfect, and it wasn't. Confession, I thought there was this really cool venue in California. And this was right after things were just starting to come back to life post COVID. And so our team in California wasn't as big as it is now. And I, flew out for the site and did a little pre-sighting before the client arrived to check out this venue that on paper was like this awesome new venue that I thought had a lot of potential to be transformed. It was close to the convention center and they wanted that. And there was all these boxes that it checked on paper. And the day before the client got there, I went around, not having been a destination expert of this portion of California, and went with one of my team members that, had candidly said, I don't know a lot about this particular venue because post-COVID, there's been a lot of changes, right? So we went to the venue and there was actually homeless people literally like camped out on the front steps. I mean, the smell and the odor around it all was like putrid. And if I had brought my client there on the site visit the next day and really had talked her up saying how cool it was, I would have been mortified. It was so embarrassing. And so in a true confession moment, I was not the local expert. I did not have a right to tell her that that was the right venue for her to pick and the right destination for her group to go to. And, collaborating with my local team and also doing the work ahead of time saved us from a really embarrassing moment. But when I ever walked up that day, I kid you not, there was someone urinating on the front steps as we were meeting with the venue manager. And I just about died. I thought, how could I have ever brought this big financial firm meeting planner into this venue? And I thought this was like my top choice going into the week. And I think those are some of the moments where our clients are super appreciative that we do the work in advance, but also in the destinations where we have all these huge offices, we know inside and out what's going to work. We can save so many of the times of going up to a venue and having a true embarrassing moment, which is what that could have and basically was for me in the pre-planning day. So have you ever had a moment?
I can't even imagine. I think, well, I think it's one of those things where if your team is not really plugged into their destination and doing the work beforehand and understanding and doing those pre-sites, you're going to run into situations like that. I used to do a lot of events in Baltimore, and there's some really great areas of Baltimore. There's some areas of Baltimore we would not recommend, but obviously areas have become more gentrified. And so we had one client who was dead set on a venue because it was this kind of open space, empty, kind of come in, you could kind of make it whatever you want, very industrial. And we kept saying, we're not 100% sure about that, but we will absolutely go and do the pre-site just to check it out, just to make sure. And I remember walking in and they had a huge party the night before because it is often used as a nightclub. It was littered with trash. It was not something that I think you could dress it up as much as you hoped, but it would still be the space that it was. And what was helpful is, we just walked around, we took some pictures. I think I FaceTimed my client in that moment to say, like, this is kind of what we're dealing with. This is what we're going to come off of. Her program was going to be off of a weekend, so that Monday or Tuesday. And I said, I don't think that we can clean this up enough to make it that shiny star. And it was really helpful because in real time, I was able to provide my client that knowledge. And they were like, okay, we have to pivot. We have to think of something else. And lo and behold, we had several other options that we had already suggested. And we went to those options next. And she fell in love with a venue that kind of still provided that industrial feel. It's actually the Baltimore Museum of Industry, but a very great venue to work in and one we recommend a lot and obviously knows how to work with corporate groups. So in real time, we were able to make that decision happen and pivot and plan a really exceptional program for her.
Totally. And that's really because of your local knowledge of knowing what is a better option and what could work for that group. Have you ever had a client reach out to you and say, well, I already looked online and I saw this venue and it says they can hold 600 people seated with a presentation. And you sit there and go, I know it says that, but I would never put more than 500 people in that room. Capacities are such an interesting thing as they're listed versus as they're experienced. Are there any moments where you have had that capacity conversation with a client where you have to say, you know what, this is not exactly what you think it's going to be when you put all these people in this room?
Yeah, I think it's, capacities are deceptive, right? Once you get everything in and you have activations and you're planning different things, those capacities are variables. I think true confession moment. Earlier on in my career, I had a client really push me to say, I know we can do more in this space. I know it's going to work. And I let the client win in that situation and to say, okay, I think we can try to make it work, even though everything I knew was kind of saying, this is a red flag. This isn't what I should be doing. And I remember there being such an overflow of people that they ended up spilling out into the outside space, like in the parking lot. And obviously, the client wasn't happy. Obviously, the attendees weren't happy. It was not the warmest day of the year. And it was an I told you so moment, but also why didn't I just push this a little bit further to say, I know what I'm talking about. Trust me in the process. You're going to be happier in the long term. Let's pick another venue that can accommodate your group, and if your group grows, because I think that's the other thing too. They go in with one number, and then you're looking at record attendance. Your attendance grows, so you also have to plan for that variable of the growth of the group. So yeah, true confession. It was not my best moment in my early event planning days, but it definitely taught me a lesson to say, this is definitely never going to happen again.
Absolutely. And trust that, because you're local and you've done events there before, and you'll never do an event there again with that number on anyone else on your team or that you have anything to do with, I'm sure. So I think that's a really good story to give as an example of that. I've certainly had several moments where I, say, why don't we flesh out a floor plan before we contract this venue, so we can say, okay, if we do squeeze 422 seats in the room, and there's a small chance you could add those 30 people that you're considering inviting from the home office, then it's not going to work anymore, right? And then a lot of times too, when we're working with groups that are affiliate events, ICW events, we call them, in conjunction with, so they're in town in conjunction with a larger conference. They're trying to capitalize off of these client audiences that are attending. They want to get as many people usually as possible, or at least, if they invite 200 people, they're hoping, 100 of them show up, but they don't know. Could all 200 come? Maybe. So those are, I think, the ones where, like you were mentioning, there is that tricky situation where you want to plan for a capacity that's a little bit bigger, but you also don't want to feel, what if only 50 people come and the space is empty, right? So I was just talking to a client about that the other day, and it was like, okay, cool. I know this venue is really cool and really beautiful, but if only 100 people come, you are not going to feel like this is a cool party. This is going to flop. So let's look at venues where 100 people can feel okay, but if your target number of 300 or 400 comes, it will also accommodate as well. And not this large venue that held, 800, 900 people that they fell in love with, because it was just going to be this empty room. If they're, especially at the start of their party, because there was sort of an after party for a reception that was happening for the main event. So all those kind of dynamics are things to think about, but that's where they lean on us to help direct them. Okay, so I also want to talk about local entertainment, because I think that is something that comes up even more so than venue selection and capacities and some of the things we've already mentioned. It's so interesting to bring the culture of a destination to life with their entertainment, and really leaning into, student dance troupes and local choirs and, artisans, that are specialists of something in their city, that you get to bring to this, group of corporate visitors that have never been to your destination potentially. I've had some really interesting experiences where we've brought to life things that you'd never even thought would be brought to a main conference stage. And there's also times where I'm like, should I have brought that to a main conference stage, right? So I had a really successful moment last year where we brought a group of student hip hop dancers. They all wore jerseys from the local team sport, and they broke up the night, which was sort of a final celebratory night of a 3-day program with big, huge dance band. And they sort of almost did like a flash mob dance in the middle of the group with a break dancing. And the kids were aged like 5 to 15. And there was about 40 of them. And it was this awesome energy level builder that felt like you're totally in this city because these kids are sports fans of the destination. They have, a huge amount of diversity to them, and they had talent, right? They had really good talent, and people were, the phones were out, everyone's capturing it. It was awesome. That same group that I worked with a couple years earlier, I had a not so successful destination moment. Confession. We actually brought a piece of entertainment from Washington, D.C. to Austin, Texas, where we were launching that the following year, or the following, next open year was being announced that it was going to be in Washington, D.C. And they wanted to kick it off with a fun piece of entertainment that came from Washington, D.C. To say, like, get ready, come to our city. So we're in Austin, Texas, and a colleague of mine who didn't know the group as well as I did. And I think that's that sort of dynamic where it's a combination of really understanding your client and that when we work with clients year over year, often, and our teams get to know the clients year over year, we get this really intrinsic knowledge of their audience and their needs. And then when we pair that with our local teams and their knowledge of what would work, we have to be really, it's a really important communication piece. And in this scenario, we had brought in these presidential performers, and it was an election year. Or leading into an election year. And it just, as soon as they showed up for the rehearsal, I took one look at the dry run, and I think I cut them off in the middle, and I said, this isn't going to work. Fly back to DC now. Like, this is not going to be appropriate for these people. And I think, in a true confession moment, I should have vetted it a little bit more, knowing my audience and my group. My colleague should have been a lot clearer with the entertainers of who this audience is and, how important it was that we were politically correct to the group. And my client stood there and was mortified. Thank goodness we did a dress rehearsal, right? Very important. And we scrambled.
Very key.
We had a local team in Austin. We were able to put together a really cool local performer to do a Star Spangled Banner moment and, something else to replace this presidential plan. And we failed. Candidly, we fully failed. And I think it was a combination of the local expertise missing the mark, but also the combination of the local expertise and the client audience and understanding who these attendees were. And I think there's two pieces to it, but you just have to have it all. And I think that's where, in a confession moment, I will absolutely always have some different conversations. And I always believe in rehearsals as well, because especially when you're bringing somebody from a destination to represent a destination somewhere else, you're paying for their flights, their airfare, their hotel rooms, their meals. And it was just a big, big loss that day. Have you ever had a situation?
And I think you make such a good point. Yeah, and I was going to say, I think you make such a good point because, we want to obviously have impact in that local market and showcase something that's local and relevant to the destination. But you also have to be really careful when you're selecting entertainment that it is the appropriate entertainment, that you are not, selecting entertainment that is going to come across as appropriating a group, or, having that impact that, or having that, performance be something that could potentially, offend a group. And even being in the DC market, I mean, we get those requests a lot, that I've, encountered throughout my career of they want these political performers or they want these lookalikes. And it's like, you have to be really careful and understanding of like what that is going to feel like for the group in the room. And is that going to be appropriate? We used to work with a kind of a comedy group in DC. They've long since retired. And everyone always wanted to work with them, called the Capitol Steps. And we realized that everyone always came in like, we want to work with this group. It's going to be great. The group is going to love it. It has this team building aspect to it. But oftentimes it wasn't the right group for the audience, even if they came into the table saying, we really want to do this. Because some of the political jokes are a little, little bit out there and a little bit off color. And they obviously interact with the audience and bring them into the fold. So you have to also make sure that people are okay and comfortable being kind of part of the show. So it's something that like we used to deal with a lot of times that, we had to really kind of carefully with, kid gloves, explain to clients what they were really going to get out of that experience.
Let's talk about too the tours that are impacted by local expertise and also the communication and how important it is to make sure your tour guides know your audience and are showcasing the right things for your destination, right? So I was on a call this morning, interestingly enough, earlier today, we had a conversation with a client who had a tour and they were not thrilled with a comment that the tour guide made about the Boston Tea Party, the no taxation without representation, and the idea around, the wealthy not, being taxed appropriately. Now, this was a group of very wealthy travelers, so that didn't land well, and it really set up the whole day for not such a great vibe. And I think that that's about communication, but it's about knowing your audience, but it's about vetting your tour guides. And here we are, later in the year, off season, and we were on the island of Nantucket, off season, and you're limited as to what your tour guides or who your tour guides can be and what their knowledge sets are. So you have to be upfront with your clients to say, hey, this is the time of year where pretty much the island's closed. We have slim pickings when it comes to guides. We will prep them as best we can. But there may be moments where they are not the, July tour guide that we would always recommend. And I think that there's some really interesting conversations that can have there. But when we dive a little bit more into tours and activities, I always find it really interesting when I'm talking to a client and they say, I really was picturing that we were going to do this, gravestone tour in New Orleans or these, monument boat rides in, the harbor, or maybe it's even just, a dune buggy ride in the desert, right? There's all these things that people picture when they go to a destination and they think, oh yeah, I just looked that up or I found one that I think will work. Well, how often are we saying, okay, there's 4 companies that do dune buggy rides. 2 of them are incredibly dangerous or not insured properly. And one of them only has 7, dune buggies and you have 70 people. And so you really need us to vet these things for you. So I find the tours to be a time where being a destination expert is so invaluable. And the conversations that we so often have around, okay, I know you love this idea and I know it speaks to this city, but let's do it a little bit differently because of your group size or because of your audience. And, again, maybe it's because of how well traveled they are or how not well traveled they are of how we need to approach this particular activity. Have you had any moments, Ashley, when you think about tours or activities or real destination experiences where you've had to sort of lay the groundwork appropriately to set it up for success and sort of show your value?
Yeah, well, I had a funny one. So we actually had a group that was dead set on, they found the tour company. They were going to do the tour themselves. They just wanted us to provide the transportation. And we told them, hey, we work with this tour group, but they do require a little bit of extra handling. And it's not a bad thing. They're very kind of, they have a diverse set of tour guides, to say the least. Sure. She was dead set. It was in Baltimore. They were going to do this Edgar Allan Poe kind of tour talking about the history and the tie-in there. What she forgot to talk to them about was what they were going to wear, because oftentimes they come as haunted tour guides, not necessarily in their polished, appropriate tour guide or, maybe historically accurate tour guides. They will come as these haunted characters. And she didn't think to ask that question, even though we kind of were intervening, saying we really would love to take this over and obviously manage this for you. And again, you have to balance the conversation of, I'm not managing this. So how involved do I need to be, and how much do I push this when they're the ones that are contracting it? And lo and behold, they had about 200 people, and they were going to be dividing up into these groups of about, 10 to 15 and doing rotating tours. And all of these tour guides come flooding in to the Sagamore Pendry dressed in haunted gear. And the client took one look at them, the color drained from her face, because she knew that this was not going to be well received by the group. They were expecting this elevated historical opportunity to kind of walk around and learn about the history of Baltimore. And you had people, with like blood streaming down their face and ghost white faces and, looking like these haunted characters. So I think it's, goes back to that conversation of, when we are the ones that are managing it and we can vet properly, we can have those conversations. We know who to talk to. We know how to navigate insurance and all of those other pieces. We can make the experience appropriate for the group and hopefully avoid that kind of situation. I'm sure if she was on her show today, she would say, confession, I would never not work with a DMC to hire you for that tour experience, because I learned a really invaluable lesson that day.
Absolutely. I think that was exactly what I was referring to when I was talking about, tours going rogue and, not utilizing the local experts for those types of things. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which is so important to have a local team, is permitting and city experiences that are unique to a destination that you really can't create on your own because they've never been done before, maybe, as an example. So I remember a few years back, we did our 10,000 person block party on Broadway in Nashville for the first time ever. So they had never shut down Broadway for a corporate group. This was a Monday night, and this was a unique experience because we took over 17 different bars and restaurants. We took over the center of the street, and we actually closed down the street for a few hours for the first time ever before for a corporate group. And the city, had never approved it. There was so many meetings with permitting and with the city that if you didn't have a local team based there that could show up, at a drop of a dime to get that across the finish line, we never would have gotten it approved. And it was the highlight of the week for these attendees. And it was honestly show-stopping. I had the pleasure of being there. It was a big band down the center of the street. After a certain point of time, we had to open it up so pedestrians could cross over at the end of the night. And everyone was like, I want to be a part of that party. I want to go to that. That looks so fun. And we really blew it away, to the point where now we have other customers saying, how do we close down Broadway for our groups? What's possible next? And there's other streets that we do it in other cities that we've created exclusive moments that our company is the only ones that have ever produced a block party in that destination. We've got one coming up outside Fenway Park in a couple weeks here. That is the first of its kind for a private group. That similar number, 10,000 people. They have never closed unless it was a ticketed event. They've done country fests and things of that nature. But this was interesting because it created such an important economic impact for this city and this part of the city that the city was able to approve it. So we had some really interesting conversations with the city around, in late November in Boston, outside of Fenway Park, what is the foot traffic that these restaurants are really going to get this day. There's no baseball. There was no concert happening at the MGM concert venue or House of Blues, which are all right there. And, they were loading in for a Spartan race. I mean, there was really nothing happening in that part of town. And we were promising over $1 million in economic impact for all of the restaurants on this street to get a guaranteed food and beverage minimum from us. And also to open up this as something that groups can do in the future so that on, January day when nothing's going on in that part of town, or, February or March, we could recreate this again in the future. And it took a lot of, city conversations. We've got all kinds of every permit you could think of we've got in place for this event. And it's the first of its kind. So I'm really excited to see it execute and come to life. But, those are the main reasons you need local teams. You really need somebody that can, get in front of the city, has the right answers to the right questions, is using the right vendors that the city already believes in, the right tenting companies. You're not bringing in a tenting company from who knows where that, nobody knows or isn't familiar with. We worked with a local reputable company that the city, grants permits to all the time. So they feel really good about their product and their equipment. And there was just so many moments like that throughout the planning process as we worked with, folks from Live Nation and Aramark and all these different major companies that were helping us get this over the finish line because it was a huge impact for their teams as well. And, if we think about it too, we've got probably 500 people working the event that day. So we've provided jobs for all of these people. And when we really look at the economic impact of this citywide event that's happening in the destination, our CVB actually pulls reports as to, the incredible amount of spend that happens because of these people being in town that wouldn't have happened otherwise, that really drives the city's economy. So I think those are some of the more interesting moments as well that we really lean on as locals to bring to life for our clients. And I also think with that, the local vendors that we use were, not only are we giving 500 people between the waiters and waitresses and bus drivers and, tent builders and decor setups and all of that. I mean, we are supplying all of our different vendors that we work with regularly, the lighting teams, the linen providers, the photographers. I mean, everybody all the way through is getting a piece of this pie and making it a positive impact on our destination. So when we work with clients and they say, oh, we're going to fly in this linen, maybe not the linens, because that's a very specific example, but we're going to fly in our own photographers and we're going to truck in decor from this destination, or we're going to bring in, a team of people, or buses from another place or whatever it is. We always look and say, how can you make an impact on bringing your meeting to this destination if you don't allow this destination to do what the destination does and has and can offer you? If there's something that isn't being provided by the city that you need, a very specific type of entertainment or a very specific request, it's one thing. But if it's something that can be done locally, consider doing it locally, because you are making a huge impact on these small businesses, on these independent contractors and these people that thrive off of these, one day events that really keep them in business on an off season type date.
Yeah, no, I have the pleasure of flying out to see that and obviously get some marketing buzz around it, because it is going to be that first ever event. So I'm so excited to see it come to life. And I think it's well rounded, right? You hit all the high level things that we are talking about today, which is that economic impact, local vendor knowledge, trust with your partners, venue partners, and your CVB, and all the things that are, all the key players that are involved, that you can build that trust, that you guys know exactly who to work with and how to execute it and bring it all together. And then really just bringing a community together to execute something from, all of those local players that get to kind of be a part of a bigger endeavor and see it all come to life.
Absolutely. We're excited for it. And I think, there's so many confessions that we can all talk about of times when we didn't do these things and we've learned from them. And hopefully
that could be its own podcast on its own, right, Cara? We could just confess all of the missteps that we've made and, all the times we've had to navigate clients in a different direction. But hopefully we've dropped some knowledge today on how to make sure that you're using your DMC partners, because you can't do it without us, right?
DMC stands for destination. We are the destination experts. And, as much as DMCs have grown and expanded and become these sort of national strategic partners, our roots are destination experts, and that hasn't changed over the years. So this was a really fun topic to discuss, and I look forward to maybe down the road hearing some confessions from some other folks as we have an opportunity to bring in some outside confessions that aren't just Ashley and I. So stay tuned for more to come on that.
More to come. Yeah, we're super excited. So we look forward to the conversations continuing.